Hi guys, how's it going? This is Miller here. I thought I'd take a quick opportunity to show off and talk about the new English Civil War command figures that have been released for Pike and Shot Epic Battles. I'll do a separate video for the 30 Years War ones, as this one's mainly going to be focusing on my main interest, which is the English Civil War. Obviously, they've released English Civil War commanders, so they've done both parliamentarians and royalist commands, which look pretty nice. They do have some similarities to the 28 mils that they already do. So let's have a quick look at what they are releasing. Okay, so let's have a look at the commanders for the parliamentarians. We have got 5 very key, or at least 4 very key commanders for the English Civil War. And they are some pretty nice sculpts, very similar to some of the 28 mil sculpts, like I said before. So we're going to have a quick look in depth at each of the commanders, a little bit about them, and what I think to them. So to begin with, we've got Sir Thomas Fairfax, a very nice sculpt here, one very similar to the 28 mil sculpt that Warlord already do. And I've always liked this sculpt. I think it's a very dynamic pose. I've seen a couple of people have done it where they make it look like he's jumping over something, as opposed to just pointing into one direction. A very prestigious commander for the New Model Army. Beforehand, he was a very clever and successful cavalry commander in the Northern Association, and a great figure to have with your army, whether it be a cavalry commander or as a general. The next sculpt is on Oliver Cromwell, and again, a very, very nice sculpt, very nice detail, and again, very similar to the one that they already do in 28 mil. Again, I really like this sculpt. I've adapted my 28 mil one to make it look like he's holding a sword and he's wearing a hat, but I've always liked this one, and again, a very prestigious cavalry commander. Most people think that he was the main leader of the parliamentarian army from the beginning of the war, and yet he wasn't. He was just a minor MP that gained renown for successes and victories that he'd had in command, and a couple of great maneuvers that he'd done in battle, and earned himself the renown that he had and gains, and ends up becoming more and more of a lead figure in the armies, and becomes the cavalry commander in the New Model Army, and then again later on becomes the leading figures in one of the parties that ends up executing King Charles. Spoilers. So a very good sculpt, or very good cavalry commander or general to have in your armies. Next up is Arthur Hesselrig, who was a cavalry commander under Earl of Essex. He very prolific cavalry commander in the First Civil War, and he commanded a unit of cuirassiers known as the London Lobsters, who were quite a deadly unit. Because of the armour they used to wear, they were very protected against musket balls or pistol balls and swords. So it seemed to be the only way that the cavalry, or the cavaliers or royalist cavalry, found to defeat them was to take out the horse rather than the rider. But they fought in many battles: Edge Hill, Lansdowne, and Runway Down, and they were quite an interesting unit to have. So they'd probably be fielded in one of my armies. But Arthur Hesselrig is probably a nice little commander to have commanding your cavalry. Again, it's very similar to the 28 mil sculpt that they've already done for him, so it's quite nice to see them keep using these sculpts as they work. Next up is Robert de Vaux, or more commonly known as the Earl of Essex. He was the main commander for the Parliamentarian Army in the First Civil War. He was relieved of command towards the end of the First Civil War with the self-denying ordinance, where they removed a lot of the MPs from command because they felt that they weren't making enough headway with the forces. They weren't making the decisions that needed to be made, or making the crucial blows. The reason behind that is believed that because they thought that possibly if they lost the Civil War, then they would be tried for treason. So it's believed that a lot more not more prestigious, but more people that wanted to make a difference took command, which is why the New Model Army came into power, which is where Fairfax takes over. Again, a very nice sculpt. Something a bit different with these sculpts is that this is where they've changed a bit of the sculpts. It's very similar to the 28 mil, but the head's turned. Not too sure why they've turned the head compared to the others, where they're quite similar. But again, very, very nice sculpt, and will be a very nice figure if you're trying to do the Earl of Essex's army. Now, the final shown commander for the parliamentarians is William Waller. A very interesting commander, and very, very interesting that they've done this sculpt, because they haven't got any 28mm versions of this sculpt, so it's a very, very nice sculpt. Again, he campaigned in the West. He was commander of the Western Association, and he's the one who had quite an interesting relation with Hopton, who was a royalist commander, and it was that they were both friends. They had fought both together in the 30 Years' War, and then they'd both chosen different sides of the war to fight on, and they fought many battles against each other, which was quite nice. And they sent a letter between each other saying that despite the fact that they were fighting, that they would always still be friends, and they didn't want it to be seen as an attack on each other, but just that they both had a job to do, which is quite a nice nice thing to learn about. Again, very, very nice sculpt, and would make a very nice commander for the Western Association, which I might do as well as every other association. But very nice. So the next section is on the Royalist commanders. Again, some really nice choices of commanders here. Again, very similar to their 28mm sculpts. We've got Prince Rupert of the Rhine. We've got his younger brother, Prince Maurice of the Rhine, Charles I, Baron Hopton, and Lord Astley. Some very, very nice choices. So let's have a look at the sculpts. So to begin with, we have Prince Rupert, or Prince Rupert of the Rhine. He was the young nephew of Charles I, and he becomes pretty much the poster boy for the parliamentarian forces. He won a victory quite early on, well, one of the first skirmishes of the Civil War, and his cavalry managed to smash the parliamentarian cavalry, as much as it hurts me to say. And for this, he becomes quite prestigious and renowned for being a good cavalry commander. He's also known for his flamboyantness, and the fact that when he would fight in a battle, his cavalry would smash the parliamentarians off the field and normally go off the battlefield and loot the baggage train. So he's a great cavalry commander in that he'll win the fight, but known for never really finishing the fight, in that he wouldn't come back. But obviously in war games it fights a bit differently. So a very nice cavalry commander, and one that I will be happily painting up for the Royalists. Sorry. Again, a very, very similar sculpt to the one that they already do for the 28mm. Again, it comes with his little pet dog Boy, which was also known for being a demon. A lot of propaganda, but the parliamentarians did was to show that his dog Boy was a demon, and that it held some of his powers, and that I think there might have even been a reward for killing him. So very nice sculpt, and yeah, lovely to paint, hopefully. The next one is Prince Maurice of the Rhine, who was the younger brother of Prince Rupert, and again a very avid and competent cavalry commander. Fought in many of the battles along with Prince Rupert, and again a very similar sculpt to the one that Warlord would do in the 28mm. Very simple sculpt. Very strange though that, or something I'm not a fan of, is that he doesn't have a chest plate. He's not got a back and breastplate or any armor like the rest of the commanding figures seem to have. If he's going to be commanding cavalry, you would think he'd be in the thick of the fight and not just wearing a very nice flamboyant red cape. But again, very nice. Might even put him on the same stand as Prince Rupert, if not mix him in with a cavalry unit rather than just having him on his own. Next of all is Charles I. Again, a very nice sculpt, very similar to the one that Warlord already do, except for this time his arm is pointing forward as opposed to the side. Now I'm guessing that's just a casting issue, or not a casting issue, but they've done it to make it a lot easier to cast the figures. I think his shoulders look very broad. I don't know if that's just because of the way of the photo, but it looks quite nice, and I'll be interested in painting him. Obviously, it's because of him that the Civil War even begins. He keeps dissolving Parliament every time he decides he wants money, and then or dissolves them every time they say he can't have the money, or they just decide that they don't want to give it to him and they want to change some of the rules, which obviously Parliament end up having enough in the end and won't have it. And he tries to arrest some of the key figures of the leading parties that are arguing against him, and it doesn't work. They run away. He decides to raise his standard in Nottingham when he's chased out of London, and it starts a war that should have only maybe lasted a year with the Battle of Edge Hill, but ends up lasting a lot longer and ends up leading to his execution in the end. Now, the last two are two sculpts that I'm actually really, really impressed that they've done. These are both Hopton and Astley. Warlord don't do sculpts like this, just like they don't with the Waller. So it's really, really cool to see that they've done these. Both very, very nice sculpts. Very simple and yet very detailed. I really like them. Astley was a commander or a general in the Oxford Army under Charles I. Obviously, if Charles wasn't there, then he needed someone else there, either as an advisor or as a general. So it's very nice to see him in there along with Hopton. Now, Hopton obviously had his combats in the south of England. He was in command of the Cornish army, and he fought mainly against Waller and obviously against Essex when Essex had his campaign. Again, Warlord don't do a sculpt, very nice sculpt, and it's just nice to see that they've done them, as they're both good commanders to have in your armies. I think a lot of people will probably go for Hopton, as he's got such a romanticised story with his fights with Waller, and he's just a really, really good commander, and I will definitely try and do some work on him especially. So some final thoughts on the figures that they're releasing, or these command figures. I really, really like what they've done. I like that they've kept quite similar to the other ones that they've done with the 28mm, and I really love that they've added these ones that they don't have figures for. I hope that they do some for the 28mm, but I think the reason they've done that is because in a lot of the supplements, or the supplement for the English Civil War, there are command skills for these commanders, so for like Astley and Hopton and Waller, and yet they don't do the figures for them. And I know that obviously normally they wouldn't mind you using different brands or different ranges for them, but for this, obviously because it's such a niche range and not a lot of other companies match the range, it's good to have those figures so that you can use for your armies. So I like that they've done that. And obviously the generals that they put on the plastic sprues, there's no reason why you can't add them in with these figures to make them on nicer command sprues. So something I will love doing, and hopefully you guys will pick some of these up just like I will. Enjoy.